On Christmas Eve of 2015, Gergana moved to the UK to begin a new life of hope and wonder. She had plans to support her family back in Bulgaria. But tragically, her life would end while on her adventures, and her killer would leave her in a suitcase. My name is Adrian, and welcome back to another video by Coffeehouse Crime. Today we're looking at the case of Gergana Prodanova, and how her disappearance led to the most harrowing of discoveries with some rather creepy surveillance footage. And by the way, I post solved, unsolved, and strange cases here on a weekly basis, so if that sounds like your kind of thing, please consider subscribing to Coffeehouse Crime. What happened to Gergana? Who was her killer, and what were his motives? Pull up a seat, grab a coffee, and sit back. This is the case of Gergana Prodanova. Today's video is sponsored by Audible. If you haven't heard of Audible, it's an online service that allows you to download audiobooks and other forms of spoken word entertainment. And it's got plenty of content to entertain, inspire, and inform. I've been using Audible for quite some time now, and it's a great way for me to escape the mundane everyday tasks like cleaning, driving, and public transport. And instead, it takes me to places far away. Personal interest of mine, but I'm a huge fan of The Witcher, and Audible's The Witcher Saga does it great justice, and you can listen to any of these books for free with my link. With the holiday season in full swing, an Audible membership can be a great gift for you or someone you love. And if you sign up through audible.com/coffeehousecrime or text coffeehousecrime to 500 500, you can get a 30-day free trial. And right now, for a limited time, you can also save 60% on your first 3 months, which is only $5.95 a month. Members get 1 credit every month, good for any title in the entire premium selection of bestsellers and new releases, regardless of price, and unused credits roll over to the next month too. And with Audible, you own your books forever. That means you can go back and listen anytime, even if you cancel your membership. That's audible.com/coffeehousecrime, or text coffeehousecrime to 500 500. And thank you Audible for sponsoring today's video. Our case today takes us to the sunny city of Exeter, which is located in southwest England. And if you're feeling deja vu, that's because our video of Penelope Jackson was in a town located just 50 miles northeast from here. Exeter is much akin to the rest of the southwest, known for its golden sunsets, cider, and even wool. But in its more modern years, the city is better known for business and tourism, one of its many attractions being its series of eerie underground passages. Not somewhere to go if you suffer from claustrophobia. But before our case takes us to the ancient city of Exeter, we must first travel 1500 miles southeast to the Bulgarian city of Stara Zagora. Translated from Slavic as the star beyond the Balkan mountains, Stara Zagora is the 5th largest agglomeration in Bulgaria. The city dates back to 342 BC. And interestingly enough, it used to be the capital to the Roman provinces of Thrace and Europe. Stara Zagora has seen many wars since then, and the city has certainly seen better days. Weathered by centuries of bloodshed and conquered by more rulers than I can count, it is just a husk of what it once used to be, with a population of roughly 140,000 residents. It was in the year 2000 that one of these residents, Gergana Prodanova, met a man named Kostadin Kostov. There is not much information before this, but in the early days of their relationship, Gergana and Kostadin were a couple who were madly in love. One thing led to another between the two, and eventually they had kids together. Not 1 or 2, but 3 healthy siblings. And although Gergana and Kostadin certainly had their sunny moments, their relationship would unfortunately become clouded with abuse over the years, and the culprit was Kostadin himself. Kostadin became violent towards Gergana, and this was on more than just a few occasions. In fact, to quote her family, Gergana eventually found herself to be living in hell. She was systematically abused and taken for granted, physically, verbally, and emotionally. Kostadin was also an alcoholic. He very frequently got drunk, and often made poor financial decisions while inebriated, this causing many financial issues in the family along the way. To quote one of Gergana's friends, they had 3 children together and they lived in Stara Zagora, but at one point they started to run out of money. He was always very, very drunk, and when he got drunk, he would get into fights and beat her brutally. He would harass her, he would lose his temper, and he would hit her. Gergana was a strong woman, And not that she should ever have to deal with his abuse in the first place, but even she had a breaking point. After several years of neglect, she eventually gave him a rather stark ultimatum: fix yourself or be gone. And every time this happened, he would always somehow manage to convince her that he would change. But these promises would never hold up. And so this vicious cycle of arguing, threatening to break up, and making up would happen again and again and again. Until eventually, Gergana had enough, deciding to formally break up with Kostadin. It was around the same time in autumn of 2015 that Gergana's mother-in-law had become seriously ill, and therefore she was unable to work. And with the money already being so scarce throughout the family, they all needed to find new ways to financially support themselves, and fast. Stara Zagora wasn't very plentiful when it came to employment opportunities, and the temptation to earn more by working in another country was always present. When it came to principles, Gergana was very family-oriented, and so, most likely due to her caring personality, she decided to migrate over to England to financially help her family out. I mean, sure, it did mean that she had to leave her children with their grandparents for a while, but she had plans to return as soon as she had made a bit of cash. And with the average wages being more than 5 times of that in Bulgaria, she would be able to return with some serious money to help her and her family out. And so on Christmas Eve of 2015, Gergana packed her bags, kissed her children goodbye, and boarded a flight to the UK. Gergana found herself at Bristol Airport, and after getting her bearings, she travelled from Bristol to the southwestern city of Exeter. England is very different to the country that she grew up in and knew so well. And without her children, family, or friends, this was a very lonely moment for her. But Gergana was strong, resilient, and resourceful. And very quickly, she found work as a cleaner at the Great Western Hotel. She became known as a very dependable and warm employee. As days turned into weeks, Gergana's social circle grew, finding a community of Bulgarians away from home. She even found love with a new man named Todorov, who treated her kindly and made her very happy. He also had a great taste in shirts. And just like that, Gergana had established herself in her newfound world, an achievement that felt exhilarating, while it lasted. I say while it lasted, as unfortunately, that would all change by the month of April 2016. Although Gergana was finally over Kostadin, it appeared that maybe he wasn't over her. And after learning of her newfound whereabouts in Exeter, he made the decision to fly over and join her in her adventures. After arriving in the UK, Kostadin tried his hardest to win back the love of Gergana, but it was too little too late. She had moved on and found a new partner. With that said, Kostadin was still the father to her 3 children, and she didn't feel like she could just throw him into the streets. And so, the two began a complex friendship in their 1-bedroom apartment on Mount Pleasant Road. Their situation grew turbulent pretty fast. Just the very next month, while on the drink, Kostadin became jealous and angry towards Gergana while at a party, resulting in him smashing her mobile phone and damaging her finger in front of her friends. Not only did this confirm that Kostadin hadn't changed, but it also scared Gergana. She therefore moved out of the apartment that she was paying for immediately, moving in with Tiomir. Gergana avoided Kostadin Kostov at all costs after that day, only returning to the apartment to change her clothes or cook. And the tension between the two was thicker than ever before. The two barely spoke, yet all the same, Kostadin refused to leave. And so, 1,500 miles away from home, Kostadin once again clouded Gergana's world. On the 4th of August 2016, Gergana's troubled life once again took a turn for the worse. And by that I mean she fell silent. Gergana had disappeared. Gergana was a very dependable employee, and so colleagues and friends were rather confused when she didn't turn up for work the very next day. And that's when strange text and Facebook messages started to appear. Those messages indeed coming from her phone and her account, but they didn't sound like Gergana. My mum has passed away. I've flown back to Bulgaria. I don't know when I'll be back. Her sudden disappearance didn't make much sense to her friends either. Gergana had made plans to meet her boyfriend and cook him dinner after work, and CCTV footage at a local supermarket confirmed these intentions. However, she never made it to Tiomir's home, and instead, at the time, this surveillance footage was her last confirmed location. Tiomir received a text message very similar to others, declaring that she was flying back to Bulgaria. Being the boyfriend to a now missing woman would evidently put Tiomir in the spotlight for detectives, but there was no evidence to suggest any form of foul play, and he had a very strong alibi from the very beginning of investigations. Even more so, he would instead be able to direct their attention towards Kostadin and Kostov, as he had heard of his previous abuse, actions and behaviour, and this would help build an initial case around Kostadin. Police brought Kostadin in for interrogation, and according to him, he was actually with Gergana when she received a phone call about her dead mother back in Bulgaria. She allegedly told him that she needed to fly back home immediately, and in response, he gave her £250 to help her along her journey. However, deep diving into these details left detectives a little confused. It didn't make much sense to them. To begin with, Gergana had a much higher salary when compared to Kostadin. They had also learned through data forensics that Gergana's mobile phone had never actually left Exeter either. And after her last confirmed appearance, all of her text messages were being sent within the same city. It was also proven that Kostadin's SIM card had been put into her mobile phone on at least one occasion, which further raised suspicion. And to add to the list of these growing concerns, Bulgarian police would confirm that Gergana's family hadn't seen or been in contact with Gergana, and her mother was still alive and well. Bristol Airport confirmed no tracked activity with her passport, and her bank accounts showed no new or foreign activity either. You get the picture. Kostadin's statement made no sense. They therefore arrested him under suspicion of murder and obtained a search warrant for their apartment. The search warrant would deliver more troubling clues. Detectives found Bulgarian currency, Gergana's toothbrush, her bags, and even her suitcase, things that would be almost essential to her if she had left. There was no DNA to suggest that any violence had taken place in the flat, but investigators did notice that the shopping items Gergana had bought from the supermarket were still there in the fridge, thus concluding that she did in fact make it back to her apartment that evening. But interestingly enough, the clothes that she was wearing that day could not be found. It was on the 16th of August, 12 days since Gergana's disappearance, that a harrowing discovery was made. An employee who worked for Network Rail noticed a foul smell coming from shrubbery away from the rail line. The embankment was located along Blackhall Road, near Howell Road Bridge, and after informing police, detectives travelled over to investigate. Peering over the stone wall, they noticed sticks and twigs which were stacked over a dark-looking object. And walking through the undergrowth to get a closer look, the smell became stronger. Detectives noticed that the object in question was a suitcase, and maggots appeared to be crawling in and out from its canvas. CSI were called in to photograph and record the scene, and eventually the suitcase was opened to reveal whatever was inside. It was in that moment that they discovered a body. The body of Gergana Prodanova. Forensic analysis would confirm detectives' greatest fears. DNA taken from tissue samples of the body ended up matching the DNA found on Gergana's toothbrush. And with the condition that her body was in, it appeared that she had been left outside to decay in the suitcase for quite some time. The family and friends of Gergana Prodanova were devastated. With Gergana missing for almost 2 weeks, they had all considered this possible outcome. However, none of them were ready to accept or believe it. Feelings of shock and despair were felt throughout all that knew Gergana, and the general public of Exeter were both puzzled and saddened of her murder, taking place in a city that is well known for its safe community. Although the uncertainty behind Gergana's disappearance had now come to an end, both effort and attention towards her case would not slip away. Instead, officers were now even more determined to find out what exactly had happened to her. It was obvious that Gergana was murdered, and they had their suspicions on who could have done it too, but there was no concrete evidence linking Gergana to Kostadin. So, who killed Gergana? And why? And what was their motives? In an effort to better understand these questions, police doubled down on their efforts to collect new evidence based on recent findings. With her body found almost a mile away from her apartment on Mount Pleasant Road, detectives now had a new location to focus on when it came to digging through surveillance footage. And, rather disturbingly, they found several video clips that would unnerve even the strongest of characters. On Sunday the 7th of August at approximately 5 AM, a surveillance camera captured a man in a baseball cap towing a suitcase around the city. Based on his posture, the suitcase appeared to be very heavy, and after idly standing on Sidwell Street for over a minute and a half, the man and the suitcase continued travelling southwest. The same ominous figure was then captured outside of a shop. He appeared to struggle when dropping the suitcase off the curb. And at 5:08 AM, he was once again seen travelling down Sidwell Street, before taking another moment to catch his breath. Just a quick note, the camera's time is incorrect. He seemed out of breath, or at the very least, he was contemplating his location. He also seemed to stop in his movements whenever anyone was nearby, before moving on when they were no longer watching. A surveillance camera at a nearby mosque on York Road would again capture the figure walking northwest. He then travelled north on Pennsylvania Road, being seen shortly after 5 AM. Pennsylvania Road is adjacent to Blackwell Road, the very one in which Gergana's body was found. You can see how heavy the suitcase must have been, the figure lurching forward in order to equalise his centre of gravity with the suitcase. There is no additional CCTV footage beyond this point, but just 29 minutes later, this same man in a baseball cap was spotted walking back in the opposite direction, with no suitcase in hand. Surveillance cameras at the local mosque once again captured this man walking in the opposite direction before changing routes. Although disturbing to watch, this surveillance footage was a big win for detectives. With Gergana's body being found in a suitcase that seemed to match the suitcase in the surveillance footage, it is very sensible to assume that this man could very well be Gergana's killer. But with the resolution of all cameras being so poor, they could only match the larger features of this figure to a suspect. Police were obviously interested in Gergana's ex-partner, Kostadin, and the figure in this surveillance footage seemed to match him pretty well too. But they needed more evidence. And luckily, that evidence would soon be found. Surveillance footage wasn't the only area of concentration for detectives, as they would also rummage through rubbish bins in the surrounding areas in an effort to find more clues that linked Gergana to Kostadin. And this effort would prove its weight in gold. Detectives were searching for several items, including this shopping bag, which was spotted in the supermarket surveillance footage on August the 4th. And eventually, they would find this very same shopping bag, along with Gergana's shirt, leggings, and underwear. The condition of the shirt was poor, and it seemed likely that it was cut away from her body. With this in mind, detectives back at their apartment located a pair of scissors found in the kitchen, and after sending it for forensic analysis, results concluded that the scissors still contained fragments of cotton from the very same shirt, therefore linking Gergana's final items of clothing to her own apartment. Forensics would also find traces of Kostadin's blood on her leggings, and even found his saliva on a can of Carlsberg, which was thrown in the trash alongside her clothes. This evidence was pretty damning, now linking Kostadin to their apartment to Gergana on the day that she disappeared. With this surveillance footage, forensic analysis and network data, detectives felt that they finally had enough evidence to try Kostadin Kostov for the murder of Gergana Prodanova. And in April of 2017, his trial began. While being questioned on trial, Kostadin often laughed and smiled, implying that he had no real perception of depth to the seriousness of his case. He kept to his side of the story, implying that Gergana's killer must be somebody else, who was also trying to frame Kostadin as the killer. But the subtleties in his language about Gergana were often noticed. Kostadin speaking about her as if she were an item that belonged to him, even implying that it was her fault that she was dead. And police had their own additional surprises too, revealing further surveillance footage of Kostadin returning to Gergana's burial site just days later, before getting his phone out and googling the question,
"How long does it take for a human corpse to decompose?"
This search being confirmed through digital forensics on his mobile phone. This fresh evidence, along with the overwhelming mass of evidence already presented, ended in a very swift and obvious verdict by the jury. In not even 90 minutes of deliberation, they had unanimously found Kostadin Kostov guilty of the murder of Gergana Prodanova. They had concluded that the cause of death was likely strangulation, and the motive for his murder was jealousy. Despite having 3 children with Gergana, he had irreparably ruined their relationship by abusing her throughout the years. When she left him for another man, Kostadin saw red. He couldn't handle his loss, and in response, he took Gergana's life. If he couldn't have her, no one would. Kostadin Kostov was sent to life in prison with a minimum of 19 years. He will be eligible for parole in the year 2036. A short sentence, considering he had taken the life of his ex-partner and denied all 3 of their children a mother and now a father. Speaking from Bulgaria, Gergana's mother would describe her pain in the loss of her daughter. She said, "The death of Gergana has completely destroyed me. I am heartbroken. She was my hope. I have deep sorrow. She didn't deserve this fate." Gergana was very kind and loved her children very much. "I cannot imagine what will happen to them now. Their grandmother, who looks after them, is almost 70, and I don't know what will happen to these kids. No one deserves such a fate." Gergana Prodanova was a kind-natured woman who had moved far away from home and her children to better support her family back in Bulgaria. She put others first and prioritized helping those that she loved above her own comfort or happiness. She could have never anticipated her own death when meeting Kostadin Kostov, but over the decades, his poisonous talons slowly dug their way into her skin. And perhaps it was her sweet nature that held on to the hope that her children's father would one day come around to be a caring husband, a loving father, and a fair man. Sadly, the only thing that Kostadin was ever able to prove was his violent cowardice. And so concludes the end of today's video. Thank you so much for watching another video today by Coffeehouse Crime. If you found this video interesting or you learned something new today, then please remember to like the video and subscribe if you haven't yet. Kostadin Kostov was by no means a good man. Let's hope he gets more than his minimum sentence. What do you think about Kostadin's actions? And do you think that Gergana could have done anything to prevent this from happening? Please let me know in the comments down below. A big thank you to Audible for sponsoring this video, and thank you to all of you for watching this case. With this being my final video in December, I wish you all a happy new year, and I'll see you in the year 2022. But until that moment arrives, look after each other. Goodbye.